Greetings, my dear friends. Just a few days back, on the 24th of February, the Ukraine war completed one full year. Billed as special operations to swiftly overwhelm Ukraine and achieve Russian objectives, it has since evolved into a major global multi-dimensional conflict involving, on one side, Europe, the US on the side of Ukraine, and Russia on the other. It delivered a major geopolitical shock. It triggered a global era of volatility, hostility, complexity, and ambiguity. It has caused major, massive fuel and food shortages. It had triggered unprecedented inflation across the US and the Eurozone, at times exceeding even 10%. It triggered a major economic crisis just when the world was beginning to see an end to the era of COVID. It forced Europe to have an uncharacteristically cold winter, upset supply chains across the board, from food to fertilizer, from energy to military equipment. It came with a massive global price tag. It is estimated that it would cost $1.6 trillion in just 2022 alone. The Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, estimates this cost to be even greater than $2.8 trillion. Germany alone lost over 4% of its GDP, or $171 billion. Europe lost over two-thirds of their global production. I did mention about inflation of upwards of 10% and a likely recession in 2023. Just for comparison, the inflation was under 3.8% in 2021. Europe has had to pay a more than 40% greater costs for its energy. Russia has estimatedly spent over $82 billion, Ukraine over $100 billion. The cost of reconstruction alone of Ukraine would turn out to be over $1.5 trillion. It was thought that in the winter, when this entire area freezes over, this would be a time to push for peace. On the contrary, it has turned out to be a time to consolidate and prepare for the expected spring offensive. On one hand, Zelensky has been asking for tanks, fighter aircraft, anti-aircraft missile systems like the Patriot, greater range and greater accuracy artillery and rockets. On the other hand, Russia is quietly going about stockpiling and preparing for the spring offensive. So, will we see an end to the war? Who will emerge victorious? What are the likely global repercussions? Welcome, my dear friends, to ChaxSimplifies. I, Commander Chakrapani, am your host. This is your channel to simplify complex geopolitical issues into easily understandable ones. In this episode, we will examine what to expect from the Ukraine war in the year 2023 and the likely impact on India. We will just take a quick look at the triggers for the war. What is the geopolitical relevance of Ukraine as far as Russia is concerned? A quick idea on where are we right now, some likely scenarios, how this could play out, and finally, the lessons learned both from the military point of view, the geopolitical point of view, and for India. Let's get started. Let's look at the triggers for the war, and we'll focus this time only on Russia and Ukraine. Let's take a look at the Russian triggers. NATO was 12 nations at the time it was founded. Today, it is 30 nations. It has progressively expanded and breached major red lines as far as Russia is concerned. NATO and the US were repeatedly warned, not just by Russians, but also by Western experts like Henry Kissinger. Yet, the US was drunk on the fact that it was a sole leader of a unipolar world it refused to accept. This situation is something similar that the US faced in the Bay of Pigs incident. We shall examine this part a little more in detail in a few minutes. Similarly, the importance of Black Sea for Russia. That is the only all-weather access all 12 months of the year for Russia, and that Black Sea access through Crimea and the port of Sevastopol was threatened by Ukraine. This again we will examine in a moment. Let's turn our eyes on Ukraine. Ukraine has been smarting under the takeover of Crimea. Ukraine has a reason to fear Russia. It wants Crimea back because that would secure the port of Odessa and its trade in the Black Sea. Zelensky, on taking over in 2019, got it inscribed into the constitution that Ukraine will aspire to join NATO and the European Union. It has been quoted by the West and the US, and it chose to ignore the Minsk peace accords, wherein one of the clauses was to hold a referendum in the ethnic Russian majority area of Donetsk and Donbass. It threatened to turn off the Kherson sluice wall that provides water to Crimea and turned one of the major bread baskets for Russia into a near desert. By itself, this could constitute a crime against humanity. Geography is very important to understand where nations find security. A study of geography shows very few access points wherein armies could march into Russian hinterland and Moscow. One major such gap is the Polish gap, which is managed with the help of the Kaliningrad enclave as far as Russia is concerned. Russia was most secure during the Soviet Union days when NATO was far away and the Warsaw Pact countries denied access. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1988, there was a tacit understanding that if the Warsaw Pact was disbanded, NATO would also be dissolved. Warsaw Pact was disbanded. NATO did not dissolve. NATO has expanded eastwards as much as over 1,000 kilometers till it is virtually on the doorstep of Russia. Ukraine is the last bastion. If NATO enters here, its access to the Russian hinterland will be unhindered through the plains that connect Ukraine to Russia. A flight time of less than 4 minutes for missiles to hit Moscow. Like I said, this is the equivalent of Bay of Pigs. On the other hand, the other geography will also tell you that as far as Russia is concerned, in the north is the Arctic Sea, frozen for most of the year. The Baltic Sea has mainly NATO countries with the exception of Finland and Norway. These two countries also want to join NATO now. The enclave of Kaliningrad gives it some semblance of control, but Russia definitely feels threatened. Baltic Sea also freezes in winter. So that leaves only the south, the Black Sea. No wonder it is most important, but because it gives unhindered access for trade as far as Russia is concerned. The Montreux Convention, signed in 1936, gives Turkey control over the sea route through the Turkish Straits. In the event of war, Turkey has the right to regulate transit of naval warships and block warships of countries involved in the conflict. Countries with coastline on the Black Sea, which would be Romania, Bulgaria, Georgia, Russia, and Ukraine, have some additional rights. They still have to notify Turkey 8 days in advance of intention to send warships through the straits. Other countries that do not have such border have to give a notice for 15 days. Trade makes the world go round. Geography enables it. Ultimately, this war is about trade and access to the sea, control and access to the Black Sea. For Russia, this is an existential crisis. Crimea is most important because Sevastopol has the Black Sea Fleet. Sevastopol also controls the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea itself. The only major port of Ukraine, Odessa, can also be blockaded if Russia so desires. If Ukraine joins NATO, NATO fleet will be in the Black Sea. That is a red line, a major one at that. So for Russia, if they don't win, they have NATO at their doorstep. And then NATO cannot be stopped and will have to put in a lot more resources than presently for defense. They will no wonder use every tool they have, however carefully they calibrate it. For NATO and the US, it exposes the soft Russian underbelly, and Russia will be forever vulnerable. And NATO sees this as an opportunity to destroy Russian military capacity now in Ukraine, even before Russia pushes westward into Poland, but without NATO boots on ground. Therefore, Ukraine is the linchpin for both Russia and the NATO. NATO is willing to provide all necessary military assistance, economic aid. It is not willing to lose and is willing to fight, as they say, till the last Ukrainian. Russia, for its existence depends on it. This war can be broadly defined or designed, looks at 4 phases. The first phase was the Blitzkrieg, the Russian attack on 24th February till about the last week of March of 2022. It thrust into Kiev. Kiev airfield was attacked and some parts taken over by 0800 hours quickly enough. Yet, it got pushed back. An over-ambitious plan, poor logistics planning, and its unwillingness to take extreme measures to take over Ukraine. It started concentrating on the south, that is Crimea, and the east, the Donbas region. The phase 2 was somewhere around end March, early April till about September of 2022. A slow Russian grinding progress in Donbas. It captured Mariupol, Melitopol, other small places, but slow progress. The phase 3 was a surprising, successful Ukrainian counterattack end September, early October to November 2022. This was a decisive turn. Ukraine launched its counter-offensive in the northeast and the south. It captured or recaptured 7,000 square kilometers, not very large area, but very fast. Kharkiv in 7 days. Lysum, a major logistics base, in 36 hours. It got more tanks, artillery, fuel than all that supplied by the West put together. All of it intact. Russia went on the back foot, and for the first time, the world started believing Ukraine could do it. Russia realized the difference between occupation and holding territory, especially urbanized, built-up areas. Their mechanized forces had to operate in a manner that did not allow for maneuver. Over 70% of the battles it faced were in this part. They had to evolve new tactics, new strategies to capture the center of town, expand outwards. The phase 4 is the consolidation phase of winter. There are about 50,000 Ukrainians training across Europe. Russia has added 500,000 new conscripts and is training them. Russia also plans to double its military size in 5 years. The building of logistics for the spring offensive on both sides is on. Kherson is an important place as far as Russia is concerned because the sluice valves for the Crimean Canal are here. Will Ukraine dry out Crimea? Major question for Russia. Phase 5, which is yet to happen, will be in the spring, somewhere around end April, early May. This will hold the key to the future. Where will be the new offensive? Will Russia do the unthinkable, take over the capital and overthrow Zelensky? Or Ukraine will try to isolate Crimea once again and take control? Russia, don't forget, has never lost a war, although it has generally been a slow starter. It is apparently badly led with poor planning, poor strategy, and tactics. This war throws out very interesting features. One of the major features here is to realize that soft power needs a hard power to back it. This hard power is especially the military. It also includes economy, supply chains, and anything and everything that can be weaponized. Weaponization from trade to supply chains, grain, fuel to information, very important. It's no longer the military that wins the war. It is an all of government, all of nation approach. At times, even all of the world approach. Narrative setting is very important. Don't forget, in the 1971 war that we had with Pakistan, Indira Gandhi had already started building the narrative, traveling across the world, drawing the attention of the world to the problem. Here, Russia did no such thing. The participation of the private sector is tremendously important. Whether it was a private army which Russia had from the Wagner Group or the Starlink satellites for communication as far as Ukraine is concerned. Amex, MasterCard, all of the PayPal, etc., made transactions very difficult for Russia. And the West used mobile data to be able to direct fire. Social media, where Zelensky was far more media savvy, proved to be a game changer. Very obviously, the use of air power, and in this conflict, the absence of use of air power has been very interesting. On one hand, you could say the air space has been democratized. From fighters to drones, from civilian aircrafts to balloons, all fight for their own space and play important roles. Leadership, especially generalship, is of prime importance when it comes to leading military campaigns. This, as far as Russia is concerned, was lacking. So where are we now? On one hand, we have a push to rearm Ukraine with newer offensive weapons. It has received unprecedented global aid, over $130 billion, from tanks to anti-tank missiles, from air defense guns to missiles, from javelins to HIMARS to rockets. Zelensky still wants more. It wants F-16s, which at the moment he's not getting. He wants more precision munitions, which he's getting. On the other hand, Russia is also consolidating. It is trying to do what was done in the World War I and World War II, digging in with trenches and ensuring its defenses. It has mobilized, like I said, 500,000 reservists and has improved its logistics planning, learning from its past mistakes. There have also been a lot of irregulars in the group. Russia has the Wagner Group, Ukraine from the Azov battalion to Dobrovolsky battalions, the mercenaries from different countries, they're all fighting on side of Ukraine. What happens to them after the war may well become a problem which Ukraine will have to resolve sometime or the other, something similar to what is happening in Afghanistan today. One not so known chapter in this entire conflict is the nuclear trade. You'll be surprised to know Russia's nuclear exports have surged by over 20% and are the highest in the last 3 years. Russia exports upwards of 245 million euros equivalent as far as nuclear trade is concerned. The Russian firm Rostrom supplies enriched uranium to 92 reactors in the US and Europe. There is a high dependence on Russian technology, services, and supplies. 17 reactors are being built in this area, and they will all get enriched uranium from Russia. Power is vitally important for Europe. No wonder, despite Zelensky's request, Europe has not sanctioned nuclear trade. Russia has withdrawn from the START talks. It has declared that its nuclear forces are ready and modernized and said we will keep on fighting. Cyber rattling, in this case, nuclear saber rattling. It has raised the specter of a false flag operation by Ukraine by staging a nuclear incident. Don't forget, Ukraine did try to do it when the G20 was meeting in Bali, when a couple of missiles did land in Poland. Yet, Russia, despite sanctions, is not so badly off. Ruble is one of the only two currencies that have actually appreciated despite the war, the dollar and the ruble. On the other hand, you have Finland and Norway, avowed neutrals, have jumped to the side of NATO and asked for NATO membership. The Nord Stream gas pipeline was bombed, as you all know, but now there are revelations of a US hand. Are they really permanent friends in geopolitics or only permanent interests? On the whole, the role of the West has been a big question mark. NATO did not understand or appreciate Russian sensibilities and red lines. It broke the promise to dismantle NATO. Clinton actively allowed Hungary, Poland, etc. to join NATO so that he could get votes from the East Europeans in US. He actually fueled Ukrainian struggle against Russians. An expansion of as much as 1,000 kilometers eastward has threatened Russia as never before. Their flirting with Ukraine has justified Russian security concerns. Yet, via the Budapest Memorandum on the 5th of December 1994, Ukraine willingly gave up nuclear weapons in return of security guarantees. The Minsk agreements of 5th September 2014 was to end the confrontation in Donbass and Luhansk. Russia was to guarantee security and Ukraine was to give self-rule. Never got implemented. Therefore, the role of the West has in many ways been of a hypocrite. It does not justify, by any stretch of imagination, the attack on Ukraine by Russia. Yet, the Ukraine war is a fascinating case study which covers all aspects of the war, from diplomacy to digital, from the importance of alliances to corruption and black market. The black market in Europe for weapons has grown manifold. Corruption charges have forced the Ukrainian president to change his defense minister and the head of Ukrainian forces in the east in the middle of the war. Propaganda and media management. Wow, look at the way the West has managed it, or Ukraine has managed it. You only hear the Ukrainian side of things. The Russian side is never visible. Economy, food, energy, fertilizer even can all become weapons. Trade, supply chains. Was globalization supposed to be a protective shield? Really? Did it ever work? Doesn't look like. On the other hand, a nuclear shield seems to be very effective because nobody says anything much as far as North Korea is concerned. So, would Ukraine be safer if it had nuclear weapons? The role of multinational global organizations like the UN, NATO, have all come under scrutiny. This war shows the greatest of geopolitical lessons as it is the first major conflict post the Second World War in Europe. Nuclear weapons seem to be the most interesting guarantor of peace. Therefore, will this trigger a new nuclear arms race? It has challenged the long established global world order and brought into focus the role of institutions. Defense budgets across the world are increasing. NATO is deploying forward, ramping up defense expenditure. Therefore, there has been a rebalancing of tools of coercion from economics to military. Military is now back again in the power calculus center from the periphery where it was. It also shows that there are no permanent friends, only permanent interests. Economic sanctions don't work. Today, China and Russia are the most sanctioned nations on the earth. Yet, they seem to be going on quite happily. Germany thought economic linkages will deter Russia. It made Germany dependent on Russia. If Ukraine has caused such a major disruption, imagine what will happen when China and Russia fight. China and the US fight. The Chinese GDP is 10 times Russia. The Chinese exports, especially its position in global supply chains, is over 5 times Russia. Chinese bank assets are 30 times Russia. Yet, does one really think Taiwan is safe? Will Xi Jinping think more before he embarks on an adventure across the Taiwanese Straits? Or will he feel a limited skirmish across the LAC with India, or with Senkaku Islands in Japan, or the South China Sea using his fishing fleet would be a more doable option? The de-dollarization of the global economy has happened, with more and more trade happening in currencies other than the dollar. Don't forget, just recently, UPI has connected India with multiple countries, and India is also knocking on the doors of this. The importance of supply chain, Atmanirbharta, has become even more important. Yet, there is a place for asymmetric balancing to counter bigger adversaries. For example, Ukraine versus Russia or Taiwan versus China. The war of perception is most important. Just think of it. Zelensky's 2100 daily briefing with Zelensky in military fatigues has become the most watched show. The military lessons are even more interesting. There has to be a clarity of objectives, and you must use the full force available, all the resources. Russia never utilized all its resources in the beginning till almost September, October, refusing to bomb the infrastructure in Ukraine. The theory that wars will be short, swift, and limited in scope because of globalization has been chucked out of the window. The military industrial complex needs more and more attention because it will need to keep up with extended campaigns and spiraling expenditure. A shift of strategy from surprise to deception is happening. The control of airspace, use of air power is a lesson which cannot be lost on any major country. Precision weapons have proven to be more effective despite high costs. Today, the ratio of precision with dumb weapons is more or less 1:10. It may well become 4:1, therefore, will imply higher costs. Drones are the new kid in town. Even cheap pizza delivery drones can become eyes and ears to warn of enemy locations, and the pizza delivery boys can act as drone operators. Tank warfare remains relevant, but tactics need to change. War by other means has become more and more relevant, and the importance of communications. So let's get back to Ukraine. What happens now? What are the objectives? Ukraine wants Russia pushed back to February 2022 boundary. It wants Russia to withdraw. It wants money and wants to prosecute for Russians as far as the war is concerned. Money for repatriations, obviously. Russia, on the other hand, is in possession of 20% of the four richest Ukrainian provinces: Luhansk, Kherson, Donetsk, and Zaporizhzhia. A referendum here, even if, as West calls it, a fake, has legitimized its occupation. It wants to keep these areas under its control so that it has security for its hinterland. It does not want NATO to include Ukraine, and Crimea is not negotiable. So, what can happen next? I foresee three or four scenarios. One, Russia wins, takes over Ukraine, takes over Kiev, Ukraine surrenders. After 1 year of fighting, will it happen? Unlikely. The result, Russia will get so strong that the neighboring countries, especially the NATO ones, will be shivering. US and NATO will not allow it. Scenario 2, the opposite. Russia attains complete military victory. Again, not possible. Russia may even get provoked to use desperate means, even tactical nuclear weapons. Third, NATO enters the war, either due to a nuclear incident or an accidental strike or even a false flag operation. This may well trigger World War III, and one hopes Sena Council will prevail. A frozen conflict, something on the lines of the line of actual control between India and China or India and Pakistan. This line of contact between Russian and Ukrainian forces has been there since 2014. It has only moved a little more westward since then. Minor skirmishes continue, but Russia consolidates along the river lines, especially along the Dnieper in the south. There could even be peace talks with certain boundaries. These are my views. Crimea retained by Russia. Russia withdraws to pre-February 2022 line in Donbass. Ukraine gives up its bid for NATO and EU membership, holds referendum in Donbass and Luhansk and gives self-rule, and gives guarantees for water in Crimea, with Kherson remaining in Ukraine. There have been some early signs of peace, with a 12-point proposal put up by China. Surprisingly, Zelensky welcomed it and he wants to meet Xi, while the West has rejected it outright. Saudi Arabia, interestingly, has sent its top diplomat to Ukraine with $410 million of assistance, including $350 million equivalent of oil grant. India, too, has shown some willingness to play a role because it has significant leverage with both Ukraine and Russia. Remember, India rescued Indian students from Ukraine, getting even Russia to stop shelling. On the other hand, it stopped attacks on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. It also spoke about not an era for war. So what are the implications for India? India must remember China is a threat. Pakistan is a pest. It must address the Chinese threat. An asymmetric balance with China is possible. And don't forget, India has practiced and experienced it. From banning of Chinese apps to FDI restrictions, banning of Chinese firm in 5G, etc. Remember, the defense budget of US is 3 times that of China. Yet, China gives replacement anxiety to the US. Chinese defense budget is over 3 times that of India. India does not figure as much in the Chinese calculus. We will have to address this, and the major difference here between India and China when it comes to the anxieties given to the bigger power is in the all of government approach, a national will, and the ability and strategy to make it happen. A strategy that integrates civil and military. Atmanirbharta. Traditionally, India speaks of the Troika of Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Durga. Knowledge, wealth, and might. It is time India effectively implements this and we benefit from our traditions. We keep options with alliances like Quad, Quad Plus, AUKUS, bilaterals with Indo-Pacific nations alive, and this will be able to give China bad dreams anytime. The surest guarantor of peace is hard power. More importantly, military power. The military has to be combat ready with appropriate joint command structures. Technologically enabled, from manufacture of chips to artificial intelligence, quantum computing to data sciences, innovations in fintech to civil military fusion. Focus on self-sufficiency and Atmanirbharta. India has a unique opportunity with presidentship of the SCO, G20 and the member of the UNSC. It will showcase its technical capability in digital space, democratize it, especially for the global south. Effectively, India seeks to speak softly and carry a big stick. So gentlemen and ladies, we continue living in very interesting times. If you improve the video, as always, please do leave a like and please do comment. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you have not already subscribed, and press the bell icon to be notified of new videos. Feel free to share this video with your family and friends, and as always, I look forward to your suggestions and continued good support. Until next time, Jai Hind.